All right, and as always, my partner in crime here on Serve, Jon Wertheim. Jon, I know you wanted to go to Amsterdam. I know you wanted to walk around those streets. Can't tell you what you may or may not do in Amsterdam. Some people are known to do there. Won't project anything onto you, but you have had a busy week reporting all sorts of news in the tennis world. It seems like there's a seismic shift in the game. I'm going to let you kind of run with this. Where are we going?
Man, well, first I can only imagine you're referencing biking, which is very popular in Amsterdam. But no, I mean, you know how sometimes we talk about Roger Rafa, Serena Novak distorting history, and people are going to have to realize that not every player wins 20-plus majors? Kind of the same thing with news this week. This was not your standard news week, and an awful lot. It seemed like every time you logged on or woke up here, there was something else. Spare a thought for Danielle Collins, who's a terrific story, but it's been buried a bit. You know, we had Rafa pulling out of Monte-Carlo, and who knows what that means for this tail end, this sort of 26-mile of his marathon career. But it was really the off-court stuff again. And one day, you and I are going to get back to talking about forehands and backhands and match results. But it just seems like we are in a crazy time with tennis politics. And I was texting Mike, and I said, look, this is not, hey, the Rams might move from Los Angeles to St. Louis. This is, hey, the AFL and NFL are merging. I mean, this is really seismic existential issues for tennis. And one of them, the big one we can talk about, maybe start there, is this official announcement. It was sort of an open secret, but now it's official. The press release came out. Contract has been signed, apparently. The WTA is holding its year-end final in Saudi Arabia. That's a big story for a lot of reasons. One of them, just put this to the side maybe, but the discussion we've been having about Premier Tour versus this sort of Saudi-backed merger that Andrea Gaudenzi is heading, that has a lot of implications for that, right? Hard to have a Premier Tour with a mixed men and women's event when the women have just signed a 3-year event in Saudi Arabia. So this is sort of advantage Gaudenzi. But I think the big issue is just this is really controversial. In a way, great. It's an infusion of cash to women's tennis. I mean, clearly somebody made a business decision. A lot of people have problems with it. We've talked about Chrissy and Martina. It didn't make much headlines. I don't think she's not going to qualify, but Venus Williams took a stand here. Venus Williams is someone with a lot of moral and principle capital here. Venus Williams would not go to Saudi Arabia. And again, my take on this is it's complicated. It's really easy to say blood money, sports washing, and it's really easy to say, hey, no country's perfect. It's a complicated issue, but I think one thing that I think we shouldn't lose sight of is that 30 months ago, the WTA pulled its business out of China, including the year-end event. Why? Because, and I will quote Steve Simon, the CEO at the time here, if powerful people can suppress the voices of women, the basis on which the WTA was founded, WTA would suffer an immense setback. So that was 30 months ago, and now we are going to a country that ranks, I think it's 131 out of 146 on a gender gap, where we've talked about women finally being able to drive. What people don't talk about is the woman that spearheaded that is now in prison on terrorism charges, where there is no penal code, where homosexuality it's criminalized. It's really problematic. And, we can play the moral relativism game, and we can sort of say no country's perfect. And we can, Billie Jean King has spun this as, hey, listen, this is how we build bridges and we make progress as we go in there and we sort of show people how to do it the right way. I guess, I hope it goes well. It's a big risk, as, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of the British economist Jessie J, but some of the writings include, it's all about the ching ching, bling bling. It's all, this is let's just call this what it is. On the one hand, we can say hypocrisy. We can also say, listen, we're running a business here, and there are there's a private equity firm that wants to see a return on its money. This is basically just a cat, and I think also you talk to people, and even the press releases. I mean, basically, it's just we need the money. This is a high bidder, and we're going for it. And again, it's very hard to sort of square this with the stance on China, which was not even 3 years ago. It's a big move. Martina and Chrissy have been very outspoken. Venus Williams has now joined the fray. It's really problematic. Maybe this leads to great modernization and westernization and open doors and progress. That's the best case scenario. It's a little weird that women's tennis is parking their event here. I think we're also seeing sports washing is quite a it's quite a monologue of mine, but I think we're also seeing sports washing, right? This is how it plays out. And at first it got controversial, and then, you have these actors that sort of soften the beach, right? And hey, Cristiano Ronaldo's there, and we've had, the UFC's been there, WWE's been there, Rafa is an ambassador, and all of that has kind of softened the beach. So yeah, we got this blast of outrage, but it'll subside. And a lot of other people have taken, one thing I think we've talked about this, one thing I'm sympathetic to the women. A lot of people have taken this Saudi money from Phil Mickelson and Live Golf to Dana White and the UFC. And now suddenly it falls on the women to sort of draw the line and say, no, our principles are going to trump money. Is that fair? So to me, it's really been interesting to see how this has played out, right? I mean, the PIF, you'll notice their logos were all over the back walls at Indian Wells in Miami. We talked about them buying the rankings. This wasn't Live Golf. This was the opposite, right? This was sort of a slow, this was what is the cliche? The frog in the boiling water, right? I mean, this was sort of slow and gradual, and the ATP holds their next gen event, and there's some exhibitions, and Rafa has some vague ambassador role. And so by the time you have this big announcement that women's tennis, this is the league of Billie Jean King that's predicated on social justice and equality and feminism, is going to Saudi Arabia, where women still need male permission to get married, where, again, it's hard to pull data, which is another problem because you don't necessarily have that in authoritarian states. You can't find out readily what the divorce rate is or what women's wages are the way you could elsewhere. But between the Sharia law and just knowing what we know about women needing permission for freedom of movement. I mean, at one point very recently, the women needed male permission to leave a domestic violence sanctuary. Women are not treated equal here. Maybe that'll change. There's a big women's forum that's going to be held in Saudi Arabia. Maybe things are trending in the right direction. But right now, it's really strange, all the more so given that Steve Simon, the CEO at the time, basically said, we're leaving China because these values aren't consistent with ours. So anyway, here we are, big headline. We'll see how it plays out. I hope everyone's safe. I hope this is a step in the direction of progress, but it really, it's really problematic. There's my TED Talk.
The 30 months thing is a good point, but something significant has happened since the decision to withdraw WTA events and we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Peng Shuai in this situation where there's weird stuff going on that still hasn't been completely answered for in China. Two very, very significant things have happened since that decision in China 30 months ago. A dumpster fire of a WTA finals in Dallas and a dumpster fire of a WTA finals in Cancun. The global market has spoken back, and it has not been good news. They barely were able to land a venue for WTA finals last year. It was an outdoor event in Cancun. The wind was blowing at 87 miles an hour, only a slight exaggeration. So it's the old Mike Tyson saying, right? Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? This is a reaction to the markets speaking to the powers that be at the WTA over the last 2 years. And so now you have someone, which is it just hasn't shown, this event on its own has not shown strength over the last 2 years. So we can, pull the yarn on the sweater and see if the whole thing falls apart, where we're trying to figure out who's to blame for that. But simply, the last 2 years, the WTA finals has not been a product that the global market has been falling over itself to go put together an organized, structured event. I don't know if that's on the WTA side, because the product is certainly there. The storylines are certainly there. So I don't know where the blame lays, but that is a seismic shift from dealing from what you thought was a position of strength 30 months ago on the China stance, and then saying, oh, you know what? This is the only way to put this is that, listen, we got caught overplaying our hand. And now we're able to play for more money than at Wimbledon, right? And it's 8 players. And I don't know how it is for the ATP currently. I don't know how it is for the WTA currently. I know a moment in time I qualified for year-end finals. I don't know what it was. It was 8 or 9 years in a row. And I know that the ATP barely broke even because they're not part of the slams. They run the entire tour. They provide the infrastructure. They provide rankings, which apparently is a sellable asset, math. I guess if you can, why not? But I know that they made their hay on World Tour finals. And that's where they made their profit in tens of millions of dollars, which is also why I never really understood when anyone on any of the tours had a problem. You don't need the whole tour to boycott. You need 8 people to boycott anything to get it your way, whether it's length of schedule, whether it's prize money. There's a very, very clear, in a normal business, that would have been leveraged very, 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 very significantly. But the market, frankly, just hasn't spoken back. And now they get this offer from the Saudis. And it's a weird place. And I'm curious, I want to ask you a question, because there are very sane, respected icons of the game who are normally, generally, as far as thought, in lockstep with each other, right? It's not often that you'll see Billie Jean King on one side of an argument and Martina Navratilova on the complete opposite side of the discussion. Same goes for Chrissy. Same goes for Rafa. Same goes for Venus Williams and Ons Jabeur, right? They could not be further apart. Now, Ons and Rafa are getting paid. I don't know about anyone else. I guess we'll see. But it is interesting. So, listen, upside, maybe Billie Jean King is right. Maybe we are the vehicle for change. And I really liked one part of this press release, John, that at least, now, can it be trusted is a different thing, but you think with sports washing, at least they're not going to create like an international incident. Like, you have to think that they're smart enough to avoid this. But they did put in there, listen, the players will be respected, right? Like, if a woman is sleeping in the same room as a woman, we are not going to make it a crime for that room during that week. Whereas normally it's like, I don't know what the penalty is. I'm assuming it's pretty significant. So I hope, and at least it was represented, that the WTA at least had the conversation to protect its players when going in to that environment of all the garble that I just said. What did I get right? What did I get wrong?
I think you raise a really important point that the casual fan might say, oh, there's a tournament in Saudi Arabia, the same way, hey, there's a UFC fight in Saudi Arabia. You raise a really good point. I've heard 1/3 of the tour's revenues come from this one event.
It's a big deal.
So
you miss on that 2 years in a row,
deal.
you're in problem. You have a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And especially when you had this baked into the budget. But when Ash Barty won the event in China in 2019, the one and only year I believe they had it there, she won more money than any player in the history of tennis at one event. Male, female, major, non-major. This is a big chunk of change that went away. I think the WTA thought the market would reward its courage and its principle, and whatever they lost getting out of China, somehow they would make it back. Sponsors would line up to support this brave outfit. You know, Microsoft and Starbucks and Facebook and Nike, they all dealt business with China and held their nose. The WTA said, no, this violates our principles. And I think the WTA overplayed their hand, thinking the market would reward this courage. That didn't happen. Your leverage goes down when it's August and September and you're still negotiating for a place to hold your finals in October. So we had 2, as you say, highly substandard events, and they took the money.
I think they were horrible events, by the way.
Yeah,
they were terrible. Dallas was an embarrassment. Cancun was not much better.
Exactly. And
the prize money in Cancun was at least $9 million, but that was up 80% from Fort Worth. And so Cancun had a $9 million prize. This is now going to be 15.25 is going to be the prize pool. And China was 14 million for the prize pool.
I mean, listen, the
and
cash
that puts it on par with the men.
Listen, we understand what this is about. We understand why it's there. It's not, it's money and it's financial security. This isn't a 1-year deal. This is a 3-year deal, right? I'm curious to see who has the option, when they can opt in. I hope that the WTA at least has an opt-out at some point. I'm guessing that gets tricky. Producer Mike, I want to ask you, you've done a lot of work, background in NFL and UFC. With the UFC, they've gone there. You've had to kind of do some work. Like, what is that whole situation over there? I feel like it's a You're kind of always uncomfortable.
With the UFC, we actually dealt with the UAE. And then recently we started doing stuff with the PFL, which love the PFL, and they just held their first event over there. You know what? And they rolled out the red carpet for them. You know, I think they made an investment with them prior to buying Bellator. And I'm not speaking out of turn. This is all like news. But they rolled out the red carpet and they put on a big event. And they want to show off these beautiful cities, you know, that they're building and these wonderful culture that they have, and all the athletes from who we filmed. We do a show called Fight Week, so we film their entire week. And they went out and they were riding camels and doing ATVs in the desert, and it was all the same stuff you see people doing in Dubai.
Was it marketing?
I think it is marketing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Riyadh season. I mean, it's Riyadh season is what they do to celebrate the city and celebrate, you know, the family. And they're doing it to bring new and innovative industry into Saudi Arabia. And I think that's important. And I think if you're the WTA, your job is to get your players paid more money. Your job is to grow the sport, not only in America, but internationally. And if you have a country that is saying, like, please come here and show your sport, if you're talking about making change, how do you make change in a place that is so closed off for so long without showing people what's possible for women? And I think that's a big key factor.
I said this when John has been on this beat where that this was going to happen since we started this show, you know, almost 3 months ago, 2.5 months ago. Here's my take. Here's what's the part that's going to piss me off. Like, I can hope that Billie Jean King is right. I can hope that if you go there and it's you can affect change, hopefully. I don't know that. I don't know that I trust it. I don't know that I need to. Let's not, like, we can say all we want and we can use all these kind of platitudes, and it's about cash. And one place has cash and they're using it to affect the way the world views them, right? And it's going to be a slow burn. A lot less pushback on this than there was for Liv, just so we're clear. Like, way less. Like, the slow roll process that John was talking about during segment one is working. Like, we can be against it, but I'm saying, like, you start to be, when you see it every week, it's less shocking in week 112 than it is in week 2, right? And that's where we are currently. What will piss me off is if the WTA takes this money and then continues their marketing about X, Y, and Z, you know, equality, we're standing on the, you know, the shoulders of legends who have took a stand for us, and the whole thing. That's on shaky ground. That's on shaky ground now, because you took the highest bidder that pretty much disagrees with everything that you've been marketing for the last 40 or 50 years. I understand why you did it. I understand that you kind of had to. You know, what they're not going to come out and say, which is what I like, maybe the financial viability of the tour and your investors who just invested a shitload of money into it. Like, you got to pay it. You got to pay the man at some point, right? Like, or you got to like pay it down. I think they were backed into a corner. I don't know that there was another option. There certainly hasn't been another obvious option the last 30 months since they made the stand. What, do you disagree? Is there like an option that's close to this, John? Do you know something that I don't?
There was first of all, I think this is when you get creative, right? I mean, there's a lot of money here. Billie Jean King has a sliver of Dodgers ownership. The Dodgers have billionaire owners. I mean, this is also when you can get creative, but I also think there was a check bid on the table that came very close. I mean, it's one of, you know, the old Churchill line about sort of, we know what you are, and now we're just negotiating. It's a great Churchill quote. It's sort of like, once you've been bought, it's just a question about what price. But one of the things that someone expressed disappointment to me is, look, this is clearly hypocrisy. This is clearly, as you say, the WTA was backed into a corner. They don't want to be doing this. This is really about economic survival. But the money is not that good. At some level, it shouldn't matter, right? But what somebody very close to these negotiations said is, look, if we were getting double, if we were getting way more than what China offered, maybe we could at least make the business case. But when a bid in the Czech Republic, where we don't need splashy press announcements about great same-sex couples will be allowed to share a bedroom without consequence. When a Czech Republic bid comes very, very close, it says something that you would take this Saudi bid instead. So I don't know if there was a superior bid, but I know there were bids that came awfully close, and maybe that 10% margin is worth giving up so you don't have to deal with all the backlash. And, again, like, I think at some level it's happened, the contract signed. It's not fair to I see, the players need to boycott. I don't think that's necessarily fair. In a best case scenario, look, this starts a conversation, and this is another blast of progress here. And this is all, I mean, we do need to at some point concede Saudi Arabia is still an autocracy. You don't have women in high government. I mean, it's still, there's a ways to go, but at least things are going in the right direction. The flip side of that is, like, I just think, we're 5 years removed from this government this isn't me talking, this is a declassified CIA document. The highest levels of government in Saudi Arabia either knew about or ordered the assassination of a journalist from the Washington Post. We're 5 years removed from that. If, heaven forbid, there were an incident like that, I mean, if I'm Billie Jean King and Rafa and Christian, not limiting it to tennis, I mean, this is a big bet. And I do think there were other options for the WTA. I think, honestly, they're pretty desperate. And this leaving China put them in a bad position.
Do you know? So the Czech bid, the price per year doesn't tell the whole story. Do you know if the Czech bid was a 3-year bid also, or is it a 1-year bid?
I think the WTA wanted a 3-year bid for a variety of reasons, which I think is smart. Charlotte was tossed around, and maybe it moves there. And I think honestly, initially the 3-year bid was a way also to say, listen, we're not going to Saudi Arabia. I mean, we've got an out, right? It's only 3 years. There'll be someone else, and we're not saying that we're moving Wimbledon. This isn't forever. But I do think, what I heard is that there was a very competitive Czech bid. It wasn't maybe quite as good, but it was close. And it's, again, you look at the press release and you look at the dollar figures. It's not as though Cristiano Ronaldo got a contract to play in Saudi Arabia that paid him more than Steph Curry, Pat Mahomes, LeBron and Aaron Judge combined. I mean, it's just goofy. I mean, well, at some point it would be nice if this were public. I heard Rafa's number.
Messi's getting more money than the top earning women's tennis player.
That has no bearing on this. The market has spoken to Cristiano Ronaldo consistently and expensively for the last 3 years before he went to Saudi Arabia. Right. There is a difference. There's no way the WTA was dealing from. It just wasn't dealing from a position of strength. The thing where you're talking about, Cristiano Ronaldo got this. That's a bullshit argument.
My point is if the women were getting 5x and this were just, you couldn't even justify this.
Yeah,
if they were blowing out the money trucks, is this a different conversation? I don't know, but I do think there was a competitive bid, and for whatever reason, the WTA, and remember, I mean, one thing we haven't talked about, which really is in the weeds, and we don't need to dwell on this, but they sold 20% of the company to private equity, right? They spin this as though it's a strategic partner. We all know what happens with private equity. We all know their game plan, and they want to get paid, and they probably want to get out in 5 to 7 years. And when 20% of your business is owned by somebody with those interests, you take the best offer on the table.
Yeah, I get it. One last thing on this, and then we'll kind of wrap until the next lightning bolt of the PIF comes down at some point. Is there a first mover advantage because there are talks with this group of slams, kind of headed by Lou Shear, who we didn't hear from this week, and Gaudenzi putting his group together has $1 billion on the table. Is there a first mover advantage for the WTA to kind of get entrenched there? And is that part of the strategy as well?
Bingo. Glad you brought that up, because I think this has real bearings on this sort of, the biggest rivalry in tennis right now isn't Alcaraz and Sinner or, Sabalenka and Iga. It's this two competing bids for the future of tennis. The Gaudenzi bid includes Saudi Arabia and includes financial backing to the tune of, $1 billion+. And yeah, if you're Lou Shear and you have this event, you have this tour set up, predicated on equality, equal prize money, mixed events, and one of them is a joint final. And now the women not only have committed to 3 years in a different location from the men, so there goes your joint final, but also they're doing it in the country that's supporting the other guys. I think this was a pretty rough week for the Premier Tour. And well played. Yeah. Good for you for bringing that up.
There has to be a world where do you necessarily think they're mutually exclusive? Like if the WTA finals goes there, can't they just, and especially if the Premier Tour happens and all of a sudden the schedule's wide open, like it's wide open spaces after the US Open, like they could still combine those, right?
Yeah, I just think if Saudi Arabia's backed one bid, they want to, Godemzi basically said, listen, I've got the bag. And it's coming from Saudi Arabia. They want to, I think it's hard to sort of, maybe there is some sort of gentle merger here. Maybe there's some meeting of the minds, but I think this was a good, it was a good week for Andrea Godemzi. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there is a first mover advantage to where you're guaranteeing 3 years of success. The check bid I don't know what the check bid was. I don't know if it's 1, 2, or 3 years. So even if they're a little less on an annual basis, 1 year versus 3 years is not the same at all, even if it's a competitive bid on a year-to-year basis. There are parts of this. One thing that I really want to agree with you on this point with full support is I hate it that Ronaldo takes it, Mickelson takes it, and then it is expected for the females of the WTA to not be able to take it. That sucks. Anyone making that argument, I don't know that there's absolute either way, especially after having 2 years of not getting that payoff for qualifying and being one of the top eight players. I'm suspicious of it. I hope nothing more than I'm completely wrong and Billie Jean King and Rafa are completely right. I would love nothing more than for that to be the case. I hope the protections for the players are as strong as represented in their press release. I don't think it's in Saudi's best interest for anything to happen along those lines. It kind of runs in the face of their entire sports washing operation. I get the reasons why they made this deal. It's just it feels a little ick. And I think it also runs in the face of, frankly, a lot of the marketing that the WTA has been putting out for a long time. So they're going to have to kind of swallow that whistle a little bit, of kind of blowing the equality and, doing the whole thing like nonstop. I think they're going to have to I don't know that they can keep marketing the same way that they've been trying to